I'm Claire Ridgway, founder of the Tudor Society and also the Anne Boleyn Files website. I'm also author of several history books, including the inspiration for this series of videos on this day in Tudor history. Now, in yesterday's On This Day in Tudor History, and if you haven't watched it, do watch it, I talked about Catherine of Aragon's death on the 7th of January 1536. Now, Catherine died away from the royal court. She'd been banished from the royal court. She died at Kimbolton Castle, where she'd resided since April 1534. Now, news of her death might have been sad for those who supported her, her friends, her daughter Mary, and people like Eustace Chapuis, the imperial ambassador, who was a very good friend of Catherine's and also an ally of her. But for King Henry VIII, it wasn't so much of a blow, and in fact it was rather good news. Now, Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, she'd defied him in his eyes. She was disobedient. She defied him by refusing to accept the annulment of their marriage and still considering him to be her true husband. And by also refusing to accept her new title. She'd been demoted from Queen to a new title of Dowager Princess of Wales, and she never recognised that title. She kept calling herself Queen until the end. So Henry must have viewed Catherine as a complete thorn in his side, particularly as she was related to the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V. Charles V was her nephew. So Henry's treatment, or rather ill treatment, of Catherine affected his diplomatic relationship with the powerful Holy Roman Emperor. So news of Catherine's death was good for Henry. It meant that he could now make an alliance with, Charles V over France if he wanted to, because there wasn't this this obstacle anymore. So how did Henry VIII react to this good news, this news of Catherine's death? Well, when a messenger arrived at the royal court to give the king news of Catherine's death, the king was said to have cried out, "God be praised that we are free from all suspicion of war." And then Chapuis, the imperial ambassador, records that on Sunday, the 8th of January, 1536, so on this day in Tudor history, the king was clad all over in yellow from top to toe, except the white feather he had in his bonnet. And the little bastard, i.e. Henry's daughter Elizabeth, was conducted to mass with trumpets and other great triumphs. So the king was celebrating this good news. Now, in the Tudors series that you might have watched, we also see Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, dressed in yellow and celebrating also the good news of Catherine's death. But is this true? Did Anne Boleyn also dress up in yellow? Well, chronicler Edward Hall, and this is a contemporary source, he was writing at the time, he records that Queen Anne wore yellow for the mourning. And by that, I mean mourning as in mourning someone's death, rather than her actually just wearing it that morning. But chronicler and Windsor Herald Charles Risley, and we pronounce it as Risley or Risley, not as Wriothesley, he makes no mention of it at all. He makes no mention of the king wearing yellow. He makes no mention at all of any reaction to Catherine's death. But Chapuis, who was at court, he'd travelled to Catherine's side at Kimbolton Castle when he heard that she was ill, and then he'd left her a few days later thinking that she was on the road to recovery and gone back to court. So he was at court, he was present when Henry VIII was celebrating, and he makes no mention at all of Anne Boleyn wearing yellow. He just mentions the king dressing up in yellow and parading with little Elizabeth, doesn't say anything about Anne. The Spanish Chronicle, which generally has to be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt due to its numerous inaccuracies, that actually corroborates Chapuis's account. It says, couriers were at once sent off to the king informing him of her death, and as soon as the king heard of it, he dressed himself in yellow, which in that country is a sign of rejoicing, and ordered all his grandees to go thither, and that she should be buried very sumptuously. So that's a corroboration of Chapuis's account. Now, I would think that if Anne Boleyn had worn yellow, that Chapuis, who was a good friend of Catherine of Aragon, who was her ally and who never really viewed Anne as queen, he saw her as a usurper, usurping the place of the true queen in his eyes. I would think that Chapuis would have mentioned Anne wearing yellow and celebrating as well, because he really didn't like her. So I kind of think that probably Anne didn't wear yellow because Chapuis would have mentioned it, surely. By the way, it is sometimes said as a kind of excuse for the king's behaviour. It is sometimes said that yellow was a mourning colour in Spain, and so Henry was kind of paying tribute to his, Spanish wife by wearing yellow. But that just is not true at all. We know that in the 16th century, black was associated with death, mourning and burial in Spain. There is nothing to support the notion that yellow was a mourning colour in Spain. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this On This Day in History event today. If you want to make sure that you catch these videos on a daily basis, then you can subscribe below. But I'll be back tomorrow with another On This Day in Tudor History event. Take care. Bye-bye.